Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to this week's lecture on the urinary system. So there's going to be a short lecture on the system itself, explaining the different aspects and the parts of it. Matt's going to join us this week, who some of you may have met already, to talk about a condition called UTIs, which you may have heard of as well, that relates to the urinary system. And there'll be some supporting a supporting video and a short quiz afterwards to test your knowledge and see where you're at. So without further ado, let's move on to learning about the urinary system. So our goals by the end of the session today, you should be able to name and describe the different parts of the urinary system. So that relates to anatomy, physiology as well, so describe the physiology or describe how each of those parts works in the urinary system, what it does. And also, as I said, in the second part of this lecture series, Matt will join us and talk about a specific condition, in this case UTIs or urinary tract infections. All right, so our urinary system essentially consists of four main parts. Okay, so these are this is the type of thing that you need to remember when talking about your assessment related to this section. Be able to label diagram like this with the different parts of it. So first up the top there, the kidneys. They do the major work in terms of filtering. Once we've filtered everything we need out of the body into the urine travels through the ureter to the bladder, where it's held until such time as we're ready to get rid of it through the urethra, which was the section there between the bladder and that's how it gets out of the body. Okay, so those four different parts, you need to be able to label those on a diagram, or be able to recognise those in a diagram or a picture of the urinary system. So the major function of the urinary system is extracting nutrients from the liquids that we drink, and also the liquid that's separated out by the digestive system. So all of those nutrients are transported by the blood, which is something that we touched on talking about the cardiovascular system a couple of weeks back. So understanding that the most efficient way to filter those nutrients out of the blood is to filter the blood itself, which is basically the job of the kidneys. So we've got two kidneys, one on either side, connected by hollow tubes called ureters. So like we said, that's where the urine, once it's produced by the kidney, travels to the bladder. Bladder is just our cell holding organ, if you like, and once that's full, then you get a message to your brain going, hey, we need to go and get rid of that. So down the toilet it goes. Okay, and the urethra is just a tube that drains the bladder, and that goes from the bladder to outside the body. Right, so there's a number of things that the urinary system is responsible for, or helps us in doing, to remain in the homeostatic state that we need to. So the first thing is removal of wastes. Okay, so that's the way that we can get waste out of our body. It's not the only way. Talking about the urinary system specifically, urea and uric acid are the main waste products that we remove through here. Not the only ones, but the main ones. Okay, it's responsible for regulating electrolyte balance. So electrolytes are minerals that are suspended. So for example, in fluid, so sodium, potassium, and calcium. So being able to remove those from the body or reabsorb them if they're needed by the body is part of the function of the urinary system. Regulation of acid-base homeostasis. So whether our blood or our cells are in balance there when it comes to acid-base or pH is another job that the urinary system has. And controlling blood volume, and maintaining blood pressure. So obviously it's a complex system where we can either, if our body has got too much fluid and too high a blood volume, then we can remove it through the urinary system. If we're dehydrated and we're lacking in fluid, obviously we can reabsorb it from the urinary system. So you'll be able to tell your state of hydration by the colour of your urine, so that if it is darker, you're more likely dehydrated, so your body has absorbed some of the fluid out of the urine to be used in the cells for and to maintain blood volume. And however, if the colour of your pee is clearer, then that is an indication that you are well hydrated, and so your body's got more than enough fluid, and then it's needing to get rid of it in the urine. So that's our system for regulating that. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more detail about the kidneys specifically, being the filtration aspect, so one of the most important aspects to the system. So they're located just under the rib cage, at the back, one each side, surrounded by a layer of fat to cushion and hold them in place. Anybody that's ever heard about or felt a kidney punch, if you get punched there just below that, those or close to those floating ribs, not a very nice experience. Okay, so the kidneys have a variety of functions. Here we go. So filtering blood and removing water, salts and wastes. Regulating the blood volume. So like I said, we can decide how much water is taken into the urine depending on our state of hydration. And that enables us to help regulate blood volume. So how much blood we physically have in our body, blood pressure and what it's composed of. And it's also got a job producing essential hormones like erythropoietin, which is again relates to our. It's one of the chemical messengers for the endocrine system that impacts our. It's a messenger around our level of hydration. Okay, some other interesting facts about the kidneys. So urine itself, when you look at the breakdown of it, it's a concentrated solution of all that waste material that's produced by the kidneys and stored in the bladder. Okay. Urine contains waste, salts, toxins, and water. So again, how concentrated that is depends on the level of hydration we've got in our body and how much of that is fluid and how much of it is waste. So if there's more fluid and less waste, then our pee is clearer. If there's less fluid and more waste, then it's darker, more concentrated, potentially smelly, normally a clue that we're either dehydrated or not very well. Okay, so the kidneys, again, remember they have an important role in maintaining blood pressure and the level of salts in the body, so the likes of sodium, potassium. Every day, about 180 litres of blood pass through the kidney, so that's a pretty incredible figure. Based on the fact that we only have, say 6, maybe 8 litres of blood in our body at any one time, depending on the size that we are. So knowing that your kidneys filter that much blood every day is pretty incredible. Kidneys cleanse all of the blood in your body about every 50 minutes, 400 times per day. Again, a pretty crazy figure, and again, if they weren't working well, that's obviously got potential for disaster in terms of how that makes our body function and feel. And at any one time, about a quarter of our blood is in your kidneys, being filtered. So your body's always working, essentially, to maintain the levels, all of those things. So we talk about blood volume, we talk about blood pressure, we talk about this, the salts, we talk about acid-base balance. They have a massive role in maintaining all of those things every day, and obviously in a relatively ever-changing environment. Okay, a little bit more detail about the structure. So the kidneys are bean-shaped organs. They have 3 distinct areas. The first one being the renal cortex, which is the outer layer. The second one being the medulla, or the middle layer. And the third one for us that we need to think about is the renal pelvis, which is the yellow part in here on this diagram. Essentially, that's where the what turns into the ureter and then obviously transports the urine to the bladder. So we're going to break that down a little bit further as well. You'll see there also labels the renal artery and the renal vein, so that's just where the cardiovascular system joins into the urinary system. So all of the blood in the body through those arteries and veins are coming through the kidneys, we said 400 times per day, which is pretty impressive. All right, so now we're going to have a look at a little bit more detail of the kidney. So the functional units that we talk about that the kidney is broken down into that essentially do all the work, it's called a nephron. So these graphics kind of explain that and break that down a little bit. You don't need to know a huge amount of detail, but it's important in understanding the structure and how the kidney works to understand that these smaller units doing the donkey work for the kidney itself. So the nephron is what the functional unit's called. There are approximately 1 million nephrons in each of your kidneys. So, they're really jammed in there. The nephron here looks like this bit here. If we kind of take a little section out of our kidney, it looks like this. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about what happens, where the blood comes in, and what happens at these different parts as well. Again, the level of detail you need to know isn't huge here, but it's good to have an understanding so that you can appreciate the complexity of these systems and these units. Okay, so they help to remove excess water, waste, and other substances from your blood, and they can help return substances like sodium, potassium, and phosphorus whenever they're running low. So there's a chance when things are processed in the kidneys, when blood's filtered. So it's filtered here at what's called the glomerulus. There is then a second chance in these tubules down here for your body to reabsorb things that it needs. So it filters out all of the things that it doesn't want. By the time we've got to here, things may have changed, so your body gets a chance to reabsorb things that it needs potentially, like sodium, potassium, phosphorus as examples. And then, so like those two parts of the nephron are the most important parts in terms of what happens there. So there's a chance, like we said, we get that filtration, we get a chance to reabsorb things that we potentially need. We then get a chance to absorb more of the body's waste before the urine then goes through the ureter into the bladder for storage. So once it's in the bladder, we can't do anything with it. Okay, so it's not a straight filter. It's a complex kind of filter with many different stages or layers of things that are happening there. So again, our clues and our cues for that nephron and that kidney to take, absorb or reabsorb what we need or don't need are really important. So those systems for regulation. Okay, we're going to talk about now specifically the bladder, being the last kind of part of that, or the bladder and the urethra together, essentially. So the bladder is the place where urine is stored, obviously until we decide to answer the call of nature and release the urine from our body. So it's a muscular sac which expands as it fills with urine. So that's important to understand, that it's the normal size it is able to expand to a certain size once it gets full. Then obviously your body gets that signal to go, oh, I need to go pee pee. Off you go, and then do what you need to do. So adults produce about 6 cups of urine per day, When the bladder is full, nerve endings in its walls send a message to the brain. So that's the I need to pee. When a person is ready to urinate, the bladder walls contract, and then the ring-like muscle called a sphincter, which sits at the bottom, opens and allows that to happen, releases the urine through the urethra. So the urethra is essentially just the tube that goes from the bladder out of your body. And that is all we need to know. So there's a link to a video here, which I will also post under this lecture that you can have a look at. It's only about 4 minutes. Some really good visuals in there. So by all means, watch that, watch this, re-watch it over and over to help you understand what's going on there. Feel free, if you want to know more, to explore some of the anatomy and physiology resources that you can access either in the library or online. So there's some really cool YouTube videos out there, the likes of Crash Course, the Amoeba Sisters, that kind of stuff that will, again, works a little bit more visually. And I know for me, I'm a visual learner, so engaging with that kind of stuff really helps me understand new concepts. So I'm going to sign off there. Have a look at the video that's below here. There'll also be a short lecture where you'll see Matt, and he'll talk about UTIs for us to kind of round out our learning outcomes for the session. And then at the end, there'll be a short quiz to go over some of this information to help to see what you've picked up and what you may need to go over again. But by all means, please do come back and have a relook at these videos or re-engage in some of the resources as often as you want. Especially for that stuff that you feel that you didn't kind of absorb or fully understand the first time. So cool, ka kite. I will see you again soon. Bye bye.